Hello, citizens. I've just returned with my partner from watching Wonder Woman 1984, the second Wonder Woman film. I'm just going to lay out my thoughts about the film and give you my positives and negatives. I'm not going to spoil anything for you, so don't worry. The premise of the film is that there's a wishing stone and it grants people wishes, and then it's kind of like the monkey's paw. You wish for something good but it does something bad, and for that concept I really enjoy it. I think for Wonder Woman films, if they continue having some sort of mythical entity or a god or magic interfering in the world and she needs to sort it out, I think that's really in her realm and suits the dynamic really well. Batman can stick to being a detective and, fighting guys with his fists. Superman can deal with all the aliens. So I think if they have those little quadrants, then that kind of works well. And then when they have a new Justice League, then they can probably mesh them together. Similar to how they did it in Young Justice, where there's a whole bunch of different villains working together from magic, scientific, or technological backgrounds. Hans Zimmer is the composer. He does an amazing job, as he always does, and just really sets each tone, each scene really well with his gorgeous music. So that's always an impressive feat for me. They lean more into the orchestra type of background music rather than having a whole bunch of flashy pop hits. So that's a win for me. Pedro Pascal is one of the villains, Mando from The Mandalorian, and his acting is great. It's really cool to see him in something with his face actually on display this time. But just being able to see him immediately, he's a great character. So I really enjoyed him as Maxwell Lord in that film. We get to see Wonder Woman in some Golden Eagle armor from the Kingdom Come comic book series, and it looks very pretty, very flashy. Probably a bit comic booky, but it's still impressive to see on the big screen. The fight scenes were really impressive. I found from the first Wonder Woman film, the last act was very, very CGI'd, but in Wonder Woman 84, they've made it more realistic and they've toned down a lot of the CGI, so you're not feeling like the fighting doesn't really matter in this one, so that's much better for me. I really enjoyed the costumes as well. Gail Gadot, in everything that she wears, looks absolutely phenomenal. There's nothing that she doesn't wear that doesn't look great in. The movie is a big throwback to the 80s, so they show off a lot of the fashion kind of styles and things during the time. I was born in the 90s, so I don't appreciate it as much, but it was still interesting. It was probably a little bit too much on the nose for me, but some people who grew up in the 80s, they'd probably enjoy seeing that throwback. The design on one of the villains, Cheetah, was really great. Just suited really well. Doesn't look, overly ridiculous. It feels like it's a part of her. The negatives for me were, it's probably a little bit cheesy. There's a ton of plot holes that are blaringly obvious. In Batman vs Superman, or the previous films, Wonder Woman mentions that she turned away from humanity for 100 years, and between World War I and 2020, 1984 definitely happened in those 100 years. She seems to be a bit of a myth, so kind of like the Batman myth, where people don't believe she exists. So she still goes around saving people, but she tells kids to be quiet and don't tell anyone or don't worry, and it's like, kids are gonna be like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen! So that's not very believable to me. The opening scene is of Themyscira. It kind of feels just shoehorned in, but it is really beautiful. You get to see all these huge rolling hills, and they're in some sort of gladiatorial arena, and it's just really, it's a fun scene. It's a fun scene. Chris Pine makes a return as Wonder Woman's boyfriend. It's still explained, but it feels a bit odd how they've done it. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether that suited you, but I feel like you'll be in two camps between how they handle that. In summary, it's still an enjoyable film. I wouldn't watch it again, as it just didn't grab me entirely. There are some still really cool scenes in it, but for the most part, it's got just a few too many plot holes that niggle at me. It is a really good kids film, I'd say, and it's probably a bit too campy and a bit too bright and bubbly for me, but I know some people who would really enjoy that, so that wouldn't bother them. I've always enjoyed the more, dark, gritty, serious films, and trying to bring these comic book characters into a real life aesthetic. But that's not for everyone, and I understand that. But still, something to put on in the background and, make your own decision about it. That's my thoughts. See ya.